Okay, hello everyone. Let me start. So, let me first present the members of the jury. So we have three external jury members who join us via Teams. So we have Pierre Pinson, who's from DTU in Denmark. We have Ricardo Bessa, who's from a research center about energy systems in Portugal, and Professor Simone Paoletti from the University of Siena. And we will hear them through the video conferencing. And here, as Liège members, we have Professor Bertrand Cornelius, who's the advisor, and Professor Gilles Luc, and myself. And now, Mr. Dumas, you have 1 hour to present.
Thank you, Quentin. Let's start the clock. So first of all, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you all for being there today. It's a great pleasure for me to present my thesis in front of you. And I would like to thank the jury members because they provided me very useful feedbacks. And it was very interesting for me sometimes to dig some topics that I have not studied, thanks to the feedbacks. And I would like also to thank my family, and then particularly Perrine, because she managed and raised our daughter during these last 3 years and a half. And I can tell you it's very easy to go to work, but it's something else to raise the children. So thank you very much, because without you, I could have never achieved this work. So let's first start with the context, and I would like to show you a very small animation. I think it speaks for itself. So, in fact, this is on the right part, this is the global mean temperature on the Earth. On the left part, it is a carbon budget, and it is evolving across the last 150 years. And we can see that across time, the average temperature is increasing, and so, of course, also the carbon budget. And here we are in 2021, and we are from this distance from the 1.5 degree carbon budget. And at this time, if we follow the emissions that are actually produced by all the human activity, it should be reached in 10 years. If we do nothing, but of course we are doing everything that we can to try to decrease the CO2 emission. And so I think it speaks for itself that to see on average the temperature is increasing, and I think you already all know that. Let's come back to the presentation. Okay. So the world consumption of primary energy is mainly composed of fossil energy. Around 84% in 2019 was composed of oil, gas, and coal. And so this is an incredible source of energy, because with this kind of energy, we can achieve so much things. And without fossil energy, we could have never achieved something like, we can use planes, we can use informatics, we can use so many technology today, thanks to this technology. So they are beautiful energy, but they emit CO2 emission. So we have to find something else. And so we are trying to help renewables to penetrate into power systems. And right now they amount for 5% of the total world energy consumption. So we need a lot of work to try to increase the share of renewables and to try to decrease the share of fossil energy, even if they are beautiful energy, but they emit CO2 emission. So this is also illustrated by this figure that illustrates the gap between rhetoric and action. So as you already know, the last few days there has been the Conference of Parties at Glasgow, and the states are trying to work on solution mitigation to try to decrease the CO2 emission. And if we take all the claims, in fact, we should reach 2.7 degrees by the end of the century, and following Glasgow, it should be around 2.4. But these are all the claims. So if it is only if all the claims are implemented. So we still need to work to put more actions to try to decrease the CO2 emission. So this thesis takes place into that context. And so you can find on many sources of information, you can find some mitigation scenario. And this one is proposed by the International Energy Agency that propose several mitigation measures to try to reduce greenhouse gases emission. And two pillars are of particular interest for me. These are first the electrification and second renewable energy, wind and solar. And into this report, the net zero emission report, you can see that they amount for quite important share of the mitigation measure, because these two pillars, they represent almost 40% of the decrease of CO2 emission by 2050. And in this thesis, I focus on these two pillars. So they are quite important into this report. But there is something which is not easy, just that renewable energy are uncertain. This is like that, they depend on the weather, and the weather is uncertain by nature. This is like that. So we need to deal with that, and this is why we are studying in power system renewable energy. It is, in fact, it represents a great challenge, because we have to ensure at all times in power system the equation between the production and the consumption. But renewable energy are uncertain by nature. So how can we ensure the balance between production and consumption if we do not know in advance the production of renewable energies? So this is one of the great challenge that we have to face. And in parallel, in the last years, we have observed digitization of energy system, a process toward decentralization, and so on. And so there has been an increased focus on data-driven decision approach, including forecasting and optimization and control of energy system. And these two techniques, forecasting and optimization, we would like them to cope with the uncertainty of renewable energy. And so there are many people that have studied these two approaches. And this was, in fact, the input of my thesis, to try to bring a little improvement into the forecasting topic and into the optimization control, and to help to try to cope with the uncertainty of renewable energy. So forecasting is a natural step for decision making. In our daily life, we all use forecasting, for instance, the weather, because every day I think we look at the weather forecast to know tomorrow and 2 days or in 3 days how will be the weather, because it impacts our daily life. And it is the same thing for renewable energies. We need some forecast to try to make a good guess of what will be the renewable production of tomorrow, or in 1 week, or in 1 month. And so the key parameter to forecast in power systems, they are renewable energy production, okay, but also the consumption. The consumption also depends on the weather. Of course, in winter, we need more heat than in summer. And in southern countries, it is the opposite, because it's hotter. So we need sometimes to put we try to cool the system, because otherwise we cannot live. But also the prices. The prices are of particular interest for some key actor players. So for instance, the energy retailer. And right now, you all know that there has been a great soaring in the electricity and gas prices, and it is a nightmare to try to forecast this price right now. On the second pillar, optimization and management, depending on the application, you could consider several techniques. And that if, for instance, you focus on short-term horizons, from a few hours away to a few days ahead, these applications concern control, dispatch, and unit commitment. But if you are, for instance, a policymaker, maybe you are more interested in system planning or expansion planning, and the horizon is more 1 year or 2 years, or sometimes decades. Depending on the system size, it is not also the same technique that you will use to try to optimize the system. If you consider a grid at the country scale, it's completely different than if you consider a microgrid or sometimes only a battery or a PV plant. So depending on the size of the system and also the horizon, you will select different type of optimization strategy. And in my thesis, I focus on the operation of microgrid for the control, the dispatch, and the day-ahead planning. So it's more like the unit commitment, but it's in between the dispatch and unit commitment. And I try to propose some techniques to help a little bit to optimize the system to cope with uncertainty. So a microgrid, in fact, it's an electrical system that is composed of generation. So it could be conventional generation, such as a diesel generator, for instance, but also renewable energy, PV, wind power, and so on, hydraulic, but also storage system and consumption. But it can be also composed of a different vector of energy. So for instance, gas. So we could imagine a consumption of gas or production based on gas and so on. But in my thesis, I focus on electrical microgrid. And at the center, you have this brain, which is the energy management system, and it tries to optimize the decision of the microgrid based on monitoring and forecasting. So it's very important to try to produce reliable forecasts of all the key variables as input of the decision-making problem. And this is what I try to do in this thesis. And so you can guess that my two main research questions are about forecasting and decision-making. So the first one is how to produce reliable probabilistic forecasts of the key parameter. And the second one is how to make decisions with this forecast under uncertainty. How can we cope with this uncertainty of renewable generation or the consumption of the electricity prices? And to try to propose optimal strategy to manage this microgrid. So in this thesis, I made several simplifications because in reality, the models are very, very complex. So first, I consider microgrid composed only of a few nodes, so very small microgrids, only composed of a few generation or storage devices or consumption, but not microgrids composed of 400 or 1000 nodes. So I study very small microgrids. I did not consider the power flows. I can explain that a little bit later if you want. I consider a static and linear model for the battery, so I did not consider non-linear model of the battery, or I did not consider the degradation of some components of the battery or of the PV plant and so on. And the day-ahead planning that I consider is composed of 24 hours. I did not consider the planning over 1 month or over 2 weeks, for instance. In my opinion, it's very important to distinguish the forecast quality and the forecast value because, as you will see just after that, it is how I divided my work as a thesis. The forecast quality corresponds to the ability of a forecasting model to mimic the characteristic of the stochastic process, and it can be assessed by using some metrics. So, for instance, if you consider point forecast, the mean absolute error or the root mean square error and so on, so you can consider some metrics to assess the quality of the forecast. And you have the forecast value. The forecast value, it relates of using this forecast into a decision-making model. So you are trying to assess how much, in terms of euro, it will help you for this system, or maybe in terms of services, if you consider, for instance, ancillary services for the TSO and so on. And so these two are different, even if you expect that if you have a good forecast quality, it should help you to achieve a good value. But it is not always the case. So that's why we have, in my opinion, to study both of them. And so in my thesis, I studied the forecast quality and the forecast value. And so that's why the work is divided into two parts. The first part on forecasting, where I consider different forecasting models. So for instance, generative model that can produce scenario, but also quantile, density forecast, and so on from other forecasting models. And I try to evaluate the quality based on some metrics. And in the second part of the thesis, I focus more on the value evaluation of these techniques, where I consider several case studies. And in this case study, if you, for instance, use scenario, maybe you will use a stochastic planner to use a scenario and to try to compute optimal bits. But if you consider quantile, for instance, it can be the inputs of a robust planner. So depending on the forecast, you will not use the same optimization strategy. And depending on the same on the case study, maybe you would like to prefer to use some scenario because depending on your forecasting and or your case study, you know that stochastic optimization should perform better than robust optimization, for instance. Or you don't know and you need to compare both of them. So that's why I divided this work into two parts. And for this presentation, I will focus only on two subparts of the first part and the second part. In the first part, I will focus on deep learning generative models. And in the second part, I will focus on a robust planner that use some quantiles to define a kind of PV uncertainty set that will be used as inputs of a robust planner. And so this will compose the two parts of my presentation. Okay, so let's focus on the first part. So this first part studies a recent deep learning technique that has been used in computer application, vision, and so on, but that was not really introduced into power system, normalizing flow. And we compare this deep learning generative model to state-of-the-art generative model, generative adversarial networks, and variational autoencoders. We implemented this model into the conditional form by using the weather forecast, and we used the open dataset of the Global Energy Forecasting Competition 2014, where there are 3 tracks, PV tracks, wind power, and the load tracks. And as you will see, on average, the normalized flow tend to be more accurate, both in quality and in value. And this work has been published, and it was a great work because I worked with several other people that helped me a lot to try to understand this model. And so they are here, Antoine, Damien, Bertrand, and Anthony. And the Python code is available, so if you want to reproduce the experiments, please use it and you can provide me some feedbacks. So the motivation of the study were that in fact only one study considered this technique, but it only compare normalizing flow on the generation of daily load profile, and it did not study in fact the weather forecast. And so it was quite a good study, but we were like, okay, we would like to know a little bit more if normalizing flow can really perform for the PV generation or for the wind power, and in terms of value, what is the value of this forecast in fact? So that were the 3 main motivations to conduct this study, because from the computer vision, we could say that, okay, normalizing flow, they tend to have a kind of quite of a good potential, but we do not know really in power system if it will work or not. So that was the motivation of this study. So we use an open data set with 3 tracks, PV, wind power, and load. So we have 3 generative models: normalizing flow, generative adversarial networks, variational autoencoders. And so they produce scenario for each track of the data set. And then we assess the quality by using 8 complementary metrics, and also the value by considering the day-ahead bidding of an energy retailer. And so at the end, as you will see, normalizing flow tend to be a little bit more accurate. But the take-home message is not that, yes, it's the best technique into the world. No, not at all. It's just that normalizing flow, they have potential. And so they have also potential in power systems. So maybe you can use them in your own application, and maybe it will help you. That was the take-home message of this study. I will not go into detail of the mathematical formulation, just to make a quick high-level comparison of the 3 models. So normalizing flow, they tend to build a bijection between the variable of interest, so PV generation, wind power, and so on, and a well-known stochastic distribution, so for instance, a normal law. And you can train the model by performing maximization of log likelihood, which is rarely the case when you consider generative model. And so it has some advantage, and we can discuss it a little bit more about if you want. And then once it's trained, you can take the inverse, and it will generate scenario. Concerning the generative adversarial network, it's completely a different training process, because on one part you have a discriminator, and on the other part you have a generator. And the generator tries to sample scenario to fool the discriminator between observation and scenario. And the discriminator is trying to distinguish which one is a scenario and which one is an observation. But it's like a competitive game, and the training is done like that. And so at the end, you hope that your generator is good enough to fool the discriminator. When you consider the variational autoencoder, it's again another training process. Here, we try to approximate the likelihood by maximizing the variational lower bound. And it is composed of 2 parts: an encoder that will encode the variable of interest into a latent space. And then you have a decoder that, once the training has been done, is able, from the latent space, to produce a realistic scenario. So we have 3 tracks. And so we divided for each track the dataset into a training, a validation, and testing sets. The learning set is used to train the model. The validation set is used to select the relevant hyperparameters, and the testing set is used to generate the scenario, and these scenarios are used to conduct the quality and value evaluation. Concerning the quality evaluation, we use 8 complementary metrics. So there are quantity score, continuous strong probability score, and the reliability diagram. They are all 3 marginal and univariate metrics. But we also introduce 2 multivariate metrics, the energy score and the variogram score. We consider also another kind of metric, that is a classifier-based metric. We can discuss that also a little bit later if you want. We study also the correlation of scenario, and we use a statistical test on the quantity score, continuous run probability score, energy score, and variogram score, sorry, to assess if the difference were statistically consistent. Concerning the value evaluation, we consider the value at beginning of an energy retailer, and the portfolio is composed of PV generation, wind power, load, and the storage system. And we decided to conduct a stochastic optimization based on the scenario of the free model. And so at the end, we compare the profit generated by this stochastic planner. If we focus on the scenario, by just performing a visual analysis, we can see directly that normalizing flow, the scenario of the normalizing flow that are here in gray, are completely different from the scenario of the generative adversarial network model, the variational autoencoder. It is striking because when you have a look at them, it seems like they are not correlated between each other. It's quite striking, in fact. And the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, there is an error in the training. It's not possible. I did not understand why the scenario were like that, but it is like that. Okay, so I investigated a little bit more, and they were still like that. So okay, maybe it's okay. I don't know. We will see. And when we computed the time correlation matrix, so here you have 100 scenario in gray. You can compute the correlation matrix for a given day, and you can see that okay, they are completely not correlated between each other. So it's really strange because for the two other model, there seems to be some correlation for a few time periods. And for the other track, it is the same thing. If you consider the PV scenario, they are not correlated between each other. If you consider the consumption scenario, it is the same trend. And in fact, here, if you consider the variational autoencoder, you can see that the scenarios are completely correlated, and it's like if they have been translated vertically. If you take a scenario, translate it a little bit, it seems to be the same. And for the normalizing flow, it's completely different. You do not have this shape. Okay, so it was a visual inspection. So let's see if in terms of metrics, we can see some differences. And when we compute the metrics, for the wind track, it is a variational autoencoder that achieves the best results, but it is followed close by normalizing flow. But for the two other tracks, the PV track and the load tracks, normalizing flow achieves the best results. So, okay, they have a completely different shape, but in terms of quality metrics, normalizing flow seems to be okay. So, okay, so let's go further more into the investigation and see if in terms of quality of value, sorry, it is the same trend or not. And when you consider the value add bidding of an energy retailer, you can compute the net profit. The net profit is the profit minus some penalty because you need to balance your portfolio on the day-ahead market. And if you deviate from your bids in real time, you have to pay some penalty to the TSO. And so we consider a stochastic formulation of this energy retailer, and we use a scenario computed by all the three models. Once we computed the net profit over all the testing set, in terms of euro, we can see that in fact normalizing flow, they achieve the best net profit comparing to the two other models. So at the end, we have a model, normalizing flow, that seems to achieve quite good results in terms of quality, but also in terms of value, even if the shape of the scenario is completely different. Now, if we consider some other criteria, you could also consider the training of the sample speed, but here for this model, it is true that normalizing flow, they took longer to train and to sample scenario. So if for you, it is very important to have a very fast technique to sample and to train, maybe you will not consider normalizing flow. But in terms of quality or value, they are quite good, and if you consider the hyperparameter search or sensitivity, normalizing flow, they tend to be okay. Because by just testing a few values manually, I found a quite good set of hyperparameter value. And for the GAN, it was quite much more difficult to find relevant hyperparameter. I spent much more time to train a relevant hyperparameter because the training process is much more unstable. However, in terms of implementation, if you implement this model from scratch, variational autoencoder is quite easy. But there is some library for normalizing flow. But if you begin from scratch, I would say that normalizing flow for a forecasting practitioner that is not an expert in deep learning, it is a little bit more difficult. So, as conclusion of this first part, I would say that normalizing flow, they can challenge GAN and VAEs. However, it's not easy to implement them, so you need maybe a library to start to play with them, but there exists some library, and for instance, Antoine Venekel has implemented normalizing flow, so you can access it freely on GitHub. And so I think, in my opinion, they can be used effectively by non-expert deep learning practitioners. And the shape of the scenario is quite interesting in comparison with the two other models, and they provided quite good results in terms of quality and value. But there are some advantages of normalizing flow I did not consider into this study. The first one is that normalizing flow directly learns the stochastic process because it is able to maximize the log likelihood, which is not the case of the two other models. And so we could imagine some application where we could take advantage of this particular feature of normalizing flow. It could be also interesting to investigate the graphical version of normalizing flow, so graphical normalizing flow, because maybe they could take advantage of the spatial dependencies between some PV plants or wind power plants and so on. And in my opinion, they have not been really studied also into power systems. So it could be also an interesting way to extend this study. And at the end, there are other generative models that seems to be quite interesting in computer vision and the computer vision field that could be extended and implemented in power systems. And so, for instance, the diffusion models. So it could be nice to have now a study that could compare GAN, VAE, normalizing flow and diffusion model, and maybe to conduct also a quality, an extensive quality and value evaluation of all of these four models. Okay, so this was the conclusion of the first part. We are right now at the middle of the presentation in terms of timing, so we can focus on the second part. So the second part is more about robust optimization and how to use some forecasts into an optimization problem. And it focuses on a grid-connected renewable generation plant with a battery energy storage system that is used in the capacity firming market. And we use a min-max-min robust optimization strategy to try to compute relevant derived bid of this plant. And as you will see, this problem is not so easy to solve because it is a min-max-min problem. So you cannot just use a solver and say, okay, solve me that, please. So we use two decomposition strategy to try to address this problem. And so this study was also published, and the Python code is in open access, so you can use it. And if you have some feedbacks, do not hesitate, because it will help to improve the result. And for instance, the column and constant generation algorithm was suggested by one of the reviewers of the paper. So to the other PhD candidate, I would say try to discuss with people and try to submit the paper, because this is where you can have some very relevant feedback to try to improve your work. About the capacity firming framework, just to be sure that we are all talking about the same thing. It is an energy market that is mainly designed for island, so for instance, the French island, but it can be also for isolated markets. And you can consider a grid-connected PV plant, but it could be also a wind power plant or hydro plant, I don't know. And you couple this system with a battery, because you need the battery, in fact, to try to take advantage of the production that is uncertain, and because during peak hours, you are more remunerated. So for a PV plant, for instance, you have the peak consumption that occurs between 7 p.m. or 9 p.m., but there is no PV at this time. It's like that. You do not have PV during the night. So you need the battery to shift the production from the day during the evening. And so like that, you can take advantage of these peak hours to make more profits. And so you have to nominate your export to the grid on a day-ahead basis, and in real time, if you deviate from the day-ahead list, you will be penalized. So you have to comply with the contract, in fact. So you try to maximize your revenue, which is the gross revenue minus the penalty, but you would like to minimize the penalty. And the penalty, depending on the framework, they can be quite high. So this is why we decided to use a robust strategy to design day-ahead bids that are robust to that and that could maybe try to minimize the penalty. So there are several strategies to solve this kind of problem, and we decided to focus on robust optimization. And so we proposed a framework where you have a forecasting technique. So here, for instance, we have normalizing flow that can compute scenario. And from scenario, you can compute some quantiles of PV prediction. And we also use a more classic recurrent neural network to compute also PV quantiles. And we will compare these two forecasting techniques. But these two forecasting techniques, they compute PV quantiles. And the PV quantiles are used to define the PV uncertainty set. This PV uncertainty set is used as input of a robust planner. This robust planner is solve an optimization strategy by using a decomposition algorithm, and it will compute day event planning. Then the day event planning is used as input of a controller, and the controller uses also PV intraday forecast. And this controller tries to, in real time, to minimize the deviation from the beam. And so at the end, we can compare between observation and the control action, the deviation, and we can compute the profit. And we also investigate a dynamic strategy to try to optimize the hyperparameter of the robust optimization problem, as we will see a little bit later. Let's just first focus on the deterministic formulation, and then we will derive the robust approach. So the goal is to minimize, to maximize the net revenue, so to minimize the opposite of the net revenue. So there is a gross revenue, which is in fact the export times the selling price, and the penalties. The penalties are when we deviate from the bid. And we would like to minimize the penalty and to maximize the gross revenue. And here in this framework, I've studied a linear and convex and piecewise linear penalty, but it could be something else, something quadratic or whatever what you do. But here in this framework, it is linear. And so the overall problem is a mixed integer linear program, and so we can solve it quite easily. And we use PV point forecast as input of this deterministic problem, and then we have the beads, and we use the controller to try to minimize the deviation between the engagement and the observation. Now, if we consider the robust optimization, it's completely different. Because we do not have PV point forecast, we consider a PV uncertainty set. And we say that the PV generation is somewhere within this PV uncertainty set, and we would like to find the worst PV trajectory within this uncertainty set to try to compute the most robust and reliable day-rate bits. And so I consider a PV interval to define the PV uncertainty set. So at the end, it is a polyhedra. But these intervals are composed with PV quantiles. So you have a lower and upper bands that are defined by a PV quantile. And so they are marginal prediction interval. I did not consider a multivariate prediction interval. So we can discuss that also a little bit later if you want. But then we can simplify a little bit the PV uncertainty set, because in the capacity firming framework, we are only interested in downward deviation. So it means that the upper bound of the PV interval are set directly to the median, so the PV quantile median. And so there is a demonstration in the manuscript that can justify this assumption. And thank you to Quentin that helped me to build this demonstration. And then we can, there is a study that demonstrated that it is equivalent to consider either the lower or the upper bound, and you do not need to consider the entire interval. So at the end, the PV uncertainty set is composed only of two values per time step. And so you have this definition of the PV interval, and the lower bound is composed by the PV quantile. So at the end, we have two parameters that define the PV uncertainty set. We have the PV quantile, but also a budget of uncertainty. And in fact, this budget of uncertainty, it restricts the number of periods where the uncertainty is allowed. And so, if this budget is equal to 0, it's like if we have no uncertainty. And so at the end, the PV interval boils down to one value, and it is like if we consider the deterministic approach. And if the uncertainty budget is equal to the number of periods within a day, so 96 in my case, it's like if we consider a full uncertainty. And so at the end, we have a polyhedron that is composed of marginal prediction interval with two parameters. Now, if we come back to the formulation of the robust approach, so we would like to minimize the objective over the worst PV trajectory. So we have a max mean problem, okay, and we are trying to maximize this over the PV uncertainty set. And we can reformulate a little bit because here's the first state variable, the engagement. They do not depend on the PV generation set uncertainty. So we can take out this mean and put the max inside. So we have mean max mean problem. And the first mean problem is the economic dispatch for a given engagement and a given PV trajectory. And the max mean problem is the worst case economic dispatch. So for a given engagement, we are trying to optimize the objective over the PV uncertainty set. And they are both mixed integer linear programs. So we cannot solve them like that, so we need to reformulate a little bit the problem. And so for the economic dispatch problem, we relax some constraints over the battery. So in fact, we remove the binary variables to prevent from discharging a charge at the same time, but I can justify that a little bit later if you want. And so like that, it becomes a linear problem. So we can take the dual of this problem. So we have a max. And so the mix max mean will become a mean max max or a mean max. And so at the end, we have only a mean max problem, which is easier to solve than a mix max mean problem. But so at the end, we can still not solve this problem. So we need a decomposition technique to solve it. And we will see that just a little bit later. So we have this mean max problem. And so the idea is to decompose the problem between a master problem that will focus on the first stage variable, so the first mean. And we have a sub-problem that will focus on the inner problem, the worst case dispatch problem. And so this sub-problem will consider fixed engagement and it will try to find a solution and it will provide them the dispatch variable to the master problem and so on. And so it will iterate between the master and sub-problem. And so there are several algorithms that can do that. And we decided to use a Bender-Dual scattering plane algorithm the first time. And then one of the reviewers suggested that maybe it could be interesting to have a look at the column constraint generation algorithm. And it was quite interesting, in fact, to compare both of them. So for the first one, the key idea, so it's to iterate between the master and the sub-problem, but the key idea is, in fact, to build some cuts, so to add some constraint to the master problem. And so we are trying to approximate the objective value of the master problem by building some cuts. And so for each iteration, the sub-problem is solved. So for a given engagement, we solve the sub-problem and it will provide some cuts to the master problem. And so Bender has demonstrated that we can converge to an optimal value. And so we implemented this technique by also using an initial set of cuts, but we can discuss that a little bit later if you want. And for the CCG algorithm, it's a little bit different. So we still have this master problem and sub-problem. The sub-problem is exactly the same, but the difference lies in the master problem, because here we are adding new constraint and variable into the master problem, not only constraint. It's a little bit different, but at the end, also, it will converge to an optimal value. Concerning the case study, so we consider a testing set of 30 days. And so we have 4 robust planners because we have 2 ways of computing the PV quantities, normalizing flow and long short-term memory technique. We have 2 decomposition techniques. And so at the end, we have 4 combinations, so 4 robust planners. But we also use as benchmark the deterministic planner. So you can just use the PV quantiles and then use the deterministic formulation. So you have 2 deterministic planners. You can use PV point forecast, so it's the third one, and you can use perfect forecast, so this is the oracle. And we normalize the result of all the planner by the result of the oracle. So as I previously said, gamma and Q controls the risk version, and we may have different strategy to set this parameter. The first one is just to consider gamma and Q fixed for all the days of the data set, and we perform a sensitivity analysis to try to identify the optimal pair. So let's first see the result for this strategy. So here the greener the better, because all the results are normalized by the result of the oracle. So the greener the better. So you cannot see, I think, the small number, but the greener the better. On the left part, it is the decomposition algorithm using the LS10 quantiles. On the right part, it is by using the quantiles of the normalizing flow. The upper part is when using the Bender's dual splitting plane algorithm, and the lower part by using the CCG algorithm. So we can directly see that by using normalizing flow quantile, it's a little bit greener here. So the results tend to be better for almost all the pair of risk averse parameter. And then if we compare the two of them, we can see that the CCG algorithm performs a little bit better than the Bender's dual splitting plane algorithm. However, the deterministic planner using PV quantile is quite good also. So we could say, okay, but it's great to use a decomposition algorithm, but at the end, the deterministic planner is okay. Yes, but we didn't know that before, and you still need to identify the relevant quantiles for the deterministic planner. So you do not know that also in advance. But we can do something a little bit more smarter than just fixing in advance the uncertainty budget and the PV quantile. We can use a dynamic strategy where we can try to adapt this parameter for each day of the data set. And based on a set of rules that is detailed into the PhD thesis, we are now considering different value for each day of the data set. So it's the same result, the greener the better. And here it's a little bit more greener than earlier, so we can see that it improves the result for the LSTM quantiles, but also for the normalizing flow quantiles. And so the results are a little bit more improved for all pair of risk averse parameter, but at the end, we still have the CCG algorithm that performs better than the Bender's dual splitting plane algorithm. And now we can find that the results are equivalent between the CCG algorithm and the deterministic planner. So we consider an integrated approach where we have some forecasters that provide PV quantiles that are used to define the PV uncertainty set that is then used as an input of a robust planner. This robust planner solves the optimization problem by using a decomposition algorithm. Then the day-ahead bids are provided to a controller that will compute set points in real time by using PV intraday point forecast. And so at the end, we have a dynamic risk averse strategy that will try for each day to adapt the hyperparameter of the robust strategy. And so the robust approach allows finding a trade-off between conservative and risk-seeking policy. However, it completely depends on your risk aversion impact. But the dynamic risk averse strategy improved a little bit the results. However, there are still many works to do, and as suggested by Ricardo, so thank you, Ricardo, that pointed me out some directions. We could consider different representation of the uncertainty set. And so I consider marginal prediction interval, and we could consider simultaneous prediction interval instead of marginal one, but also multivariate polyhedra. And so here on this figure, we have in blue the robust polyhedron. So this is the one I use, but we could define other PV uncertainty set which are better centered or better shaped around the measurement. So there are still many work to do, maybe to improve this strategy. We could also design an improved dynamic risk averse strategy. We could use a machine learning tool. Imagine that this machine learning tool could tell you, based on some information, so for instance, for a forecast, it could tell you, okay, use this value of gamma or use this quantile. It could be much more better than just relying on a set of rules. We could also use a completely different optimization strategy because I use a robust approach. And as suggested also by Ricardo, we could use stochastic programming. And in stochastic programming, you have the first formulation that is risk neutral when you consider the maximization of the expected value. So if you only consider this part with k equals to 0, but you could also include the risk management by including, for instance, a metric. So for instance, the conditional value at risk. And so this formulation allows also to find a trade-off between risky approach and neutral risk approach. But we could also use chance constraint optimization, and then we could make a proper comparison of the robust approach and the stochastic programming and chance constraint optimization approaches. And for all approaches, we could use a scenario of the deep learning generative model as inputs. And at the end, we could extend this case study by considering an entire energy community, because here I only consider one microgrid, but we could consider on this island several microgrids that are connected And so maybe it will be interesting then to consider the power flow, nonlinear model of battery, or the component degradation and so on. Then the optimization problem will be much more complex, so we would need other optimization strategy maybe to solve it. So for instance, we could try to decompose the problem by using other decomposition technique and so on. So during this presentation, I decided to focus on only two subparts of the thesis work, because in my opinion, they illustrate well the work I conducted during this thesis. The first one was on deep learning generative model, where we use deep learning technique to generate scenario, and we conducted quality and value analysis of this scenario. Then we used this scenario as input of the robust optimization planner. This robust optimization planner, based on a PV uncertainty set, try to optimize the energy management system of a grid-connected PV plant with a battery by looking for the worst PV trajectory over this PV uncertainty set. And this problem is not straightforward because it's a min-max-min problem, so we use a decomposition technique to approximate the optimal solution. So, as a function of this study, there are, of course, many works to do. So first, just by looking on forecasting, we could try to study forecasting technique of the future. So by taking advantage of the underlying physical process, for instance, right now, there are some neural network where you can put some physics inside of it, and maybe it will help you to compute some relevant forecast. But we have also new forecasting techniques, so for instance, diffusion model or graphical normalizing flow and so on, I don't know. So it could be very interesting to try to use them in power systems application. And I think it could be also very interesting to try to improve probabilistic forecast assessment, because we have so many metrics to assess a forecast, and sometimes we do not know really which one is the best in which situation and so on. So maybe to have a kind of unified framework to try to compare forecasts, or to try to identify some open data set that everybody could use, because right now everybody uses its own data set, and sometimes it's very difficult to compare the technique between each other. And so that's why, for instance, I decided to use an open data set, but not everybody uses an open data set. So I think there is many work to do in that direction. Now, if we focus more on optimization, we could imagine technique machine learning technique that could simplify optimization problems. So the machine learning problem could learn a part of the optimization space, and it could help to solve faster the optimization problem, or to provide a good starting point for the optimization problem to solve. There is another direction that is more focused on the modeling and simulation of energy systems. So we could maybe try to apply this technique to more bigger energy systems. And so, for instance, there are some open models like EnergyScope Typical Day that consider the entire Belgian energy system. And maybe it could be interesting to try some techniques developed into this thesis, or to consider multi-criteria optimization, consider new metrics, because most of the time we optimize the cost, but it could be also interesting to try to optimize the energy return of investment, for instance, or the CO2 emission, or other kind of metric, because when you design an energy system, okay, you are interested in the cost, but maybe you are not only interested in the cost. So how can you design an optimal energy system based on several criteria? And finally, I think it could be also interesting to try to mix machine learning and psychology, because I think we all know that in our daily life we have some behavior, and sometimes we do some things and we do not know why we do these things. And maybe machine learning could help us to point some direction into some behavior that would help us to reduce our carbon footprint, for instance. Imagine that we could monitor some data into our home. Maybe it can provide us some reward when we are doing something that will help to reduce the carbon footprint, for instance. Or maybe to address the rebound effect, which is a famous effect into all-day life. Most of the time when we introduce a new technology, we have a rebound effect. So how can we address that? Or maybe to facilitate behavior change and so on. So I think it could be also a kind of a very nice research direction to mix machine learning and psychology. So thank you for your attention, and I hope yes, okay, it's okay. I still have 1 minute and 30 seconds, but I can stop right now. It will be 50 minutes. So thank you very much for your attention, and I would be very happy to answer the question of the jury member.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.